You lost, old-timer? Petty Officer First Class Ryan Cole called across the security lane, loud enough for 3 nearby SEALs to hear. The men glanced over, and one of them smiled before quickly looking away. Walter Mercer didn't answer. At 82, he had learned that silence made impatient men reveal more than questions ever could. He stood just beyond the visitor checkpoint in a faded olive field jacket, worn jeans, and brown leather boots polished by years rather than ceremony. A battered canvas bag hung from his right hand. No medals, no unit insignia. Nothing about him explained why an elderly civilian had appeared at a restricted section of a Navy SEAL base on a bright Tuesday morning. Beyond the fence, rotor noise rolled across the compound. Walter's pale blue eyes followed a helicopter before it cleared the roofline, then drifted toward the training buildings in the distance. Ryan noticed. Tour groups on the other side of the base, sir. Walter kept looking past him. Wind came off the water carrying salt through the warm morning air. A halyard snapped against a flagpole with a sharp metallic rhythm. I'm not here for a tour, Walter said. His voice was low, weathered, almost lost beneath the distant engines. Ryan checked the tablet in his hand. Name: Walter Mercer. Ryan typed it. Nothing appeared. He tried again, slower this time. Still nothing. No Mercer on today's visitor list. Walter gave a small nod, as though this possibility had already occurred to him. I was invited. By who? Walter's gaze settled on a long concrete building nearly a quarter-mile away. For the first time, something shifted behind his eyes. Not uncertainty. Recognition. Someone who isn't here anymore. Ryan lowered the tablet. Behind him, another SEAL exchanged an amused glance with his teammate. To them, Walter looked like another aging veteran who had returned hoping to see a place that existed more clearly in memory than reality. Ryan stepped slightly closer. Sir, this isn't the kind of place where you can just walk in because you knew somebody 40 years ago. Walter finally looked at him. There was no irritation in his expression. That bothered Ryan more than anger would have. It was different then, Walter said. Ryan glanced around at the reinforced buildings, security cameras, antennas, and immaculate concrete stretching toward the waterfront. Yeah, I'd imagine just about everything was. Walter studied the compound again. His eyes moved from the pier to the training tower, then toward an old strip of pavement partly hidden behind newer construction. Almost everything. Ryan frowned. Walter had said it with the quiet certainty of a man describing his own house after someone rearranged the furniture. A few yards away, Chief Petty Officer Nathan Briggs looked up from a clipboard. He had been listening without appearing to listen. Ryan tapped the tablet against his palm. All right, Mr. Mercer. If you're supposed to be here, give me something I can verify. Unit. Rank. Somebody who knows you. Walter's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the canvas handle. Names won't help you yet. Ryan gave a short laugh. Nathan Briggs didn't. He was staring at the old man's bag now, and at the faded patch barely visible beneath its worn flap. Walter noticed him noticing. For several seconds, neither man moved. Then Nathan slowly set down his clipboard. Nathan Briggs did not touch the faded patch. He simply watched Walter Mercer with the careful attention of a man who had spent enough years around professionals to recognize habits that could not be learned from movies or museum tours. Walter stood naturally to one side of the security lane, never blocking the entrance, never turning his back completely toward the open compound. When a utility cart approached from behind, he shifted half a step before its electric motor became obvious. When another helicopter passed somewhere beyond the buildings, his eyes moved toward the sound almost automatically. Ryan Cole noticed none of it. He was still studying the empty search result on his tablet. Walter Mercer, Ryan repeated. No appointment, no sponsor, no temporary clearance. You understand why that creates a problem? I do, Walter said. The answer was so calm that Ryan briefly looked disappointed. He had expected an argument. Walter offered none. Then help me solve it. Who invited you? Walter glanced toward the distant concrete building again. Thomas Hale. Nathan's expression changed almost invisibly. Ryan typed the name. There are plenty of Hales in Navy records. There were, Walter replied. Ryan looked up. What does that mean? Walter said nothing. The morning sun had climbed higher, throwing a hard white glare across the pavement. A group of younger sailors crossed nearly 100 feet away, talking loudly until they noticed the small gathering at the checkpoint. Walter ignored them. His attention had settled on the layout of the base itself. He studied a row of newer structures, then the narrow road running toward the waterfront. That road used to turn farther east, he murmured. Ryan followed his gaze. You have been here before? A long time ago. How long? Walter considered the question. Long enough that most of what I remember is underneath what you built over it. One of the younger SEALs behind Ryan gave a quiet chuckle. Ryan turned slightly, then faced Walter again. Sir, knowing what this place looked like decades ago does not establish authorization. I did not say it did. Again, no defensiveness. No attempt to impress him. Walter seemed almost indifferent to whether Ryan believed him, and that was beginning to irritate the younger man. People who arrived with stories usually wanted an audience. Walter appeared to want nothing except passage through the gate. Nathan finally stepped closer. Mr. Mercer, were you assigned here? Walter's eyes moved to him. Sometimes. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Sometimes. We did not always call places what they were. The amusement disappeared from Nathan's face. Ryan sighed and held out his hand. All right. Identification again, please. Walter reached into his jacket slowly and handed him the same worn state identification card. Ryan inspected both sides. Ordinary. He looked toward the canvas bag. And I am going to need to inspect that. Walter hesitated for the first time. Not fear. Not resistance. Something closer to reluctance. His thumb rested against the weathered strap. Nathan saw it. Anything sensitive in there? He asked. Walter looked down at the bag as if it contained years rather than objects. Not anymore. He placed it carefully on the inspection table and opened the flap. Inside were only a few things. An old wristwatch that had stopped at some forgotten hour. A sealed envelope yellowed at the edges. A photograph lying face down. A small radio handset from another era. And beneath them, the corner of that faded patch Nathan had noticed. Ryan reached toward it. Nathan's voice stopped him. Do not. Ryan turned. Nathan was no longer looking at Walter. He was staring at the patch. Chief. Nathan took one slow step closer to the table. Mr. Mercer, he said quietly. Where did you get that? That? Walter asked. His eyes settled on the sliver of faded cloth beneath the radio handset. It came with the work. Ryan Cole glanced at Nathan Briggs, then back at the bag. That does not exactly narrow it down. Walter gave the faintest shrug. Nathan remained still. The patch was so worn that its original colors had nearly disappeared, leaving only a dark shape and several threads where lettering might once have been. Ryan leaned closer. I cannot even tell what unit that is. You are not supposed to, Walter said. The answer landed differently than everything before it. One of the younger SEALs stopped smiling. Ryan folded his arms. All right, Mr. Mercer. Let us make this simple. You say Thomas Hale invited you. You say you have been on this base before. You carry an unmarked patch that nobody recognizes. What unit were you with? Walter looked beyond the gate again. A training whistle sounded somewhere near the waterfront. He listened until it faded. Units changed. Your rank. Changed too. Ryan exhaled through his nose. That is convenient. Nathan shot him a warning glance, but Ryan continued. Sir, I am trying to give you every opportunity here. People come through these gates with stories. Some served. Some knew somebody who served. Some remember things differently after 50 years. We verify everyone. Walter nodded once. You should. Ryan had expected resistance again, and again received agreement. It robbed his challenge of momentum. Nathan noticed something else. Walter had not once asked who was in command. He had not asked where the operations building was. He had not asked where the waterfront had moved. Yet his eyes kept finding each location before anyone mentioned it. Nathan stepped beside the inspection table. What was here before that communications building? He asked suddenly. Ryan looked at him. Walter did not. He kept his gaze on the compound. Nothing you would call a building. Nathan waited. 2 temporary structures. Walter continued. Gravel between them. Generator on the south side because the north side flooded when the tide came high. Nathan's jaw tightened. Ryan looked toward the modern communications building. You could have read that somewhere. Maybe. Walter's voice remained quiet. Nathan asked another question. What did men call the old road to the pier? This time Walter turned toward him. For a second, something almost amused appeared in the old man's eyes. Depends which men you mean. Nathan's expression sharpened. The ones who worked after midnight. The wind pushed against Walter's jacket. He studied Nathan for several seconds before answering. Long walk. Nathan said nothing. Ryan looked between them. What is long walk? Nothing official, Nathan replied. His voice had changed. I heard it from an instructor 23 years ago. Ryan's skepticism faltered, but only slightly. That still does not prove who he is. No, Nathan said. It does not. Ryan looked back at Walter. Then let us settle it. If you were really attached to people here, you had some kind of designation. Something they called you. Walter's gaze dropped toward the old radio handset. He did not reach for it. Everybody gets called something eventually, Ryan continued. What was yours? Nathan turned sharply toward him. Cole. But Ryan had already asked the question. Walter's face became unreadable. The distant rotor hum seemed to deepen across the base. His fingers rested against the edge of the canvas bag, inches from the silent radio. For the first time since arriving, the old veteran did not answer. Walter Mercer let the silence remain between them. Ryan Cole waited, expecting an answer, but the old man only looked down at the canvas bag resting on the inspection table. The radio handset lay beside the faded patch, its black casing scratched dull by decades of use. One of the younger SEALs stepped closer and picked it up before Nathan Briggs could stop him. This thing still work? He asked, turning it over in his hand. Walter watched the handset with an expression Ryan could not read. Not anymore. The young man smiled. Then why carry it around? Walter's eyes remained on the radio. Because once it did. Ryan gave a quiet sigh. That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters. The young SEAL ran his thumb across the worn push button. Looks like something from a museum. Walter finally reached out. He did not snatch it away. He simply held out his hand until the younger man placed it there. Walter's fingers closed around the handset with practiced familiarity. His thumbs settled naturally along one side, exactly where the plastic had been polished smooth from years of use. Museum pieces are usually things people stopped needing, Walter said. We needed this. Nathan's attention sharpened. For what? Walter turned the handset once in his palm. Bringing men home. The humor around the checkpoint disappeared. Even Ryan hesitated before speaking again. You keep saying things like that, Mr. Mercer, but you are not giving us anything we can verify. Walter returned the handset to the bag. Beneath it, the old photograph shifted slightly, but remained face down. The sealed envelope beside it carried a name written in faded blue ink. Ryan leaned closer. Thomas Hale. He looked up immediately. That the same Hale you mentioned? Walter closed the flap halfway. Yes. Then let me see the letter. Walter's hand stopped. No. It was the first direct refusal Ryan had heard from him. If it establishes why you are here, it could solve this. It was written to me. Ryan straightened. And you brought it onto a restricted installation. I brought it back to where it belongs. Nathan looked from the envelope to Walter. Something in that sentence unsettled him. Mr. Mercer, he said carefully. Thomas Hale has been gone for years. Walter met his eyes. I know. Then why today? Walter looked toward the base again. The morning activity continued beyond the checkpoint, indifferent to the small mystery gathering at its edge. Because I promised him I would come back once. Ryan's expression softened for only a moment before procedure returned. A promise still does not get you through this gate. I know that too. Walter began closing the bag. Ryan placed a hand on the table, stopping short of touching Walter. We are not finished. Chief Briggs asked about your unit. I asked what they called you. You have avoided both questions. Walter looked at Ryan's hand, then at his face. Some names were not meant for paperwork. Ryan shook his head. Every sailor has a record. Nathan spoke quietly. Not every record tells the whole story. Ryan turned toward him. Chief, you really believe this? Nathan did not answer. His gaze had returned to the patch. Walter pulled the canvas flap over it, but for 1 second the cloth caught the sunlight. Nathan saw the faded outline clearly enough this time. His breathing changed. Somewhere in his memory, an instructor's voice from 23 years earlier returned with a phrase he had not thought about in decades. A name spoken only once. Nathan looked at Walter. Sir, he said, suddenly formal. Before you answer Petty Officer Cole, I need to ask you something about that patch. What exactly do you want to know? Walter Mercer asked. Nathan Briggs kept his eyes on the canvas bag. The marking. The one beneath the handset. Walter did not move. You recognized it? I recognized part of it. Nathan's voice had lost every trace of casual curiosity. Ryan Cole looked between them, increasingly impatient. Chief, it is a faded patch. We still do not have a unit, a rank, or a valid sponsor. Nathan ignored him. My first instructor mentioned a symbol like that once. He said it belonged to people who operated before half the procedures we use today were written down. Walter's expression remained still, but his thumb pressed lightly against the bag strap. Your instructor had a name? Senior Chief Daniel Foster. Something flickered behind Walter's pale eyes. Foster talked too much. Nathan stared at him. Ryan caught the change immediately. You knew him? Walter looked toward the waterfront. I knew a lot of men. Ryan stepped closer to the inspection table. His skepticism was no longer amused. Now it had an edge. Then give us one thing we can verify. You served around here. You knew Thomas Hale. You apparently knew Senior Chief Foster. Fine. What did they call you? Walter remained silent. A gust rolled across the compound, tugging at his faded field jacket. The American flag above the administration building snapped once in the wind. Farther out, the low pulse of helicopter rotors moved across the morning air. Ryan waited. Come on, Mr. Mercer. Everyone gets called something. One of the younger SEALs behind him added, especially back then. Nathan turned. Enough. But Walter raised one hand slightly. It is all right. His voice was almost gentle. Ryan folded his arms. Was it some nickname? A radio name? A call sign? Walter's gaze dropped toward the old handset. For several seconds, the bass around him seemed to recede. The voices became distant. The engines became a low hum. His fingers moved across the worn plastic as though remembering exactly where they had rested when the device still carried voices through darkness and bad weather. Nathan saw the old man's posture change. Barely an inch. But suddenly Walter did not seem lost at all. He seemed precisely where he had intended to stand. Ryan gave a small, doubtful smile. Well, Walter lifted his eyes. Black tide. The words were quiet. No drama. No pride. Ryan blinked. One of the younger men glanced at another. Black tide. Ryan repeated. That is it. Walter nodded once. That was it. Ryan almost laughed, but Nathan's pen slipped from his hand and struck the pavement. The tiny sound cut through the checkpoint like a bell. Everyone turned toward him. Nathan did not bend to retrieve it. His face had gone pale. Chief? Ryan asked. Nathan stared at Walter as though the 82-year-old man had changed shape in front of him. Say that again, sir. Walter's eyes narrowed slightly. You heard me. Nathan took one careful step forward. I need to know exactly how they said it. Walter said nothing. Nathan swallowed. Was it Black Tide 6? Ryan's expression tightened. The younger SEALs were no longer smiling. Walter looked at Nathan for a long moment, then shook his head. No. Nathan's breathing slowed. Then what? Walter placed the handset back inside the bag. Just Black Tide. Nathan closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, whatever doubt had been there was gone. Ryan noticed and lowered his arms. Chief, what does that mean? Nathan did not look at him. Black Tide 6 was a team leader. His voice was barely above the wind. Then he fixed his eyes on Walter. Black Tide was the man the name came from. Ryan Cole stared at Nathan Briggs, waiting for the explanation that did not come. The wind pushed across the checkpoint, carrying the smell of salt and warm concrete, while somewhere beyond the buildings a helicopter settled into a steady idle. Walter Mercer closed the canvas bag with deliberate care. Chief, Ryan said, lowering his voice. You are telling me that name belongs to him? Nathan finally looked at Ryan. I am telling you I heard it once, 23 years ago, from Senior Chief Foster. And Nathan glanced toward Walter. Foster was teaching us about judgment. Not weapons. Not tactics. Judgment. He told us there had been men whose names never appeared in the stories people repeated publicly. Then he mentioned Black Tide. One of the younger SEALs shifted his weight. Nobody was smiling now. Ryan looked at Walter again, searching the old man's face for some sign of satisfaction. There was none. Walter seemed almost uncomfortable with the attention. What did Foster say about him? Ryan asked. Nathan hesitated. Not much. That was the point. He said if we ever heard the name from someone who had earned the right to use it, we should stop talking and start listening. Silence returned. Ryan's expression hardened, not from arrogance now, but from uncertainty. That is still a story. Yes, Nathan said. Which is why I am going to verify it. Walter lifted his eyes. You do not need to make a production out of this. Nathan gave him a measured look. With respect, sir, I think we passed that point about 5 minutes ago. He stepped away from the inspection table and pulled out his phone. Ryan followed him several feet. Who are you calling? Command office. Ryan lowered his voice further. Chief, You are going to call command because an 82-year-old visitor gave you an old call sign? Nathan stopped. No, I am calling because he knew Long Walk. He knew Foster. He brought a letter from Thomas Hale. And when you asked his call sign, he gave me the one name Foster told me I would probably never hear in my lifetime. That ended the argument. Nathan placed the call. A duty aide answered after 2 rings. Chief Petty Officer Nathan Briggs at Gate 2. I need identity verification on a visitor. He listened. Walter Mercer. Approximately 82 years old. Another pause. Nathan looked at Walter across the pavement. No, he is not on today's list. Ryan watched his face. Nothing happened. Then Nathan said, there is one more identifier. Call sign Black Tide. The response on the other end changed so abruptly that Nathan pulled the phone slightly away from his ear. Yes, he said. I am certain. A longer silence followed. Understood. Nathan lowered the phone. Ryan stepped closer. What? They are transferring the call. To who? Nathan did not answer immediately. At the inspection table, Walter had turned away from them. His gaze rested on the distant waterfront as if the conversation no longer concerned him. The line clicked. A different voice came through. Nathan straightened instinctively. Yes, sir. Nathan Briggs, Gate 2. He listened. Walter Mercer. Another pause. Yes, sir. Nathan's eyes moved toward the old veteran. He said Black Tide. This time the silence lasted several seconds. Then the voice asked something Nathan had not expected. His expression changed. I will ask him. Nathan lowered the phone and walked back toward Walter. Mr. Mercer, command wants to know if you still have the radio. Walter looked down at the canvas bag. The question seemed to reach somewhere far behind his eyes. Who asked? Nathan swallowed. Commander James Holloway. Walter became very still. Holloway, he repeated softly. Nathan nodded. Walter looked toward the command building. Tell him the radio is here. Nathan raised the phone again. Sir, he says it is here. The answer came immediately. Nathan listened, then slowly lowered the phone. Ryan could see something had changed. What did the commander say? Nathan looked at Walter first. He said nobody touches that bag. Then he turned toward the base. And he is coming here himself. For several seconds, nobody at Gate 2 moved. Ryan Cole looked toward the command building nearly a quarter-mile away, then back at Nathan Briggs, as if he had misunderstood what he had heard. The commander is coming here? Nathan slipped the phone into his pocket. That is what he said. Ryan glanced at Walter Mercer. The old veteran had already turned his attention back to the canvas bag. No smile. No satisfaction. No sign that having the base commander personally cross the compound meant anything to him. That calm unsettled Ryan more than the call itself. Mr. Mercer, Ryan said, his voice noticeably different now. You knew Commander Holloway was here? Walter shook his head. Never met him. Ryan frowned. Then how does he know about you? Walter rested both hands on the worn canvas strap. Maybe he does not. Nathan gave him a long look. Sir, commanders do not leave briefings for names they do not know. Walter's eyes drifted toward the waterfront. Sometimes they leave for names somebody else remembered. The answer only deepened the silence. Behind them, the younger SEAL who had handled the old radio stepped away from the inspection table as though distance itself had suddenly become a form of respect. Ryan noticed and said nothing. Across the base, movement began to change. An officer emerged quickly from the administration building. Another followed. A government vehicle started, then stopped almost immediately. Nathan watched the entrance. He is walking. Ryan turned. What? Nathan pointed. Commander James Holloway had appeared at the far end of the central walkway, moving toward Gate 2 without an escort. 2 staff officers followed several paces behind, struggling to match his pace. Ryan straightened instinctively. The younger men did the same. Walter remained still. Sir, Nathan said quietly, you might want to know something before he gets here. Walter looked at him. Nathan continued. Senior Chief Foster told us Black Tide was not a normal call sign. Walter's expression gave nothing away. Foster liked stories. He said it was older than the system that recorded it. Walter looked toward the approaching commander. Some things were easier when nobody recorded them. Ryan heard that and finally lost the last trace of amusement in his face. What exactly did you people do? Walter turned toward him. Our jobs. That is all you are going to say? That is usually enough. Holloway was now less than 200 feet away. Conversations along the walkway began fading as sailors noticed their commander moving with unusual purpose. Nathan lowered his voice. There is something else, Foster said. Walter waited. He said black tide was the voice men listened for when plans stopped making sense. Walter's eyes shifted toward the radio inside the bag. For the first time, age seemed to settle heavily across his face. Plans usually make sense in rooms, he said. The world outside the room has its own ideas. Nathan absorbed the words without replying. Ryan looked down at the inspection table, at the stopped wristwatch, the sealed letter bearing Thomas Hale's name, the face-down photograph, and the radio handset that Commander Holloway had ordered nobody to touch. 10 minutes earlier, they had looked like the belongings of an old man carrying too much of yesterday with him. Now every object seemed to be withholding something. Holloway was 50 feet away when he suddenly slowed. His gaze had found Walter. The commander stopped in the middle of the walkway. One of his staff officers nearly walked into him. Nobody spoke. Holloway stared at the elderly man beside Gate 2, then lowered his eyes to the canvas bag. Walter slowly lifted his gaze. Whatever Holloway saw confirmed something no database had. He resumed walking, but his pace was different now. Measured. Deliberate. When he reached the checkpoint, Ryan drew himself rigidly to attention. Holloway passed him without a glance. He stopped directly in front of Walter. Mr. Mercer? Walter studied his face. Commander Holloway. Holloway's eyes moved once more toward the bag. You still kept it. Walter followed his gaze to the radio. I kept my promise. Holloway became silent. Then he asked the question that made Nathan's expression tighten. Does Thomas Hale's letter still have the seal on it? Walter Mercer looked down at the canvas bag. It does. Commander James Holloway drew a slow breath, and for the first time since arriving at Gate 2, the authority in his face gave way to something quieter. Then he was right. Ryan Cole glanced toward Nathan Briggs, but Nathan appeared equally uncertain. Walter rested his hand over the bag. About what? Holloway did not answer immediately. Behind him, the two staff officers had stopped several feet away. Sailors farther down the walkway had begun noticing the unusual gathering, yet nobody approached. Holloway finally said, Thomas Hale told me there might come a day when an old man carrying a radio would appear at this gate. He told me not to ask for medals, not to ask for paperwork. He said I should ask one question. Walter's pale eyes remained steady. Thomas always liked making simple things complicated. A faint expression crossed Holloway's face, almost a smile, but it disappeared quickly. He said you would say that too. Walter lowered his gaze. The wind moved through the checkpoint, fluttering the corner of the sealed envelope visible inside the bag. Ryan stared at it. Minutes earlier, he had wanted to inspect that letter. Now he understood why Walter had refused. Holloway turned toward him. Petty Officer Cole, what call sign did Mr. Mercer give you? Ryan straightened. Black Tide, sir. The words sounded different now. Holloway's eyes hardened with recognition. Exactly those words. Yes, sir. Not Black Tide 6. No, sir. Just Black Tide. Holloway looked at Nathan. Nathan nodded once. That matches what Senior Chief Foster taught us, sir. Holloway was silent for several seconds. Then he turned toward his staff officers. Cancel the remainder of my morning briefing. One officer blinked. Commander, the operations review begins in 20 minutes. Then they can begin without me. Yes, sir. Holloway faced Walter again. There are people inside who need to meet you. Walter shook his head. That is not why I came. I know. I came because of Hale. I know that too. Walter studied him carefully. How? Holloway looked toward the sealed envelope. Because he told me. That answer finally disturbed Walter's calm. His fingers tightened around the canvas strap. When Holloway glanced toward the long concrete training building beyond the checkpoint. 3 years before he died, I was still learning how to command men who were better at their jobs than I was. Hale had a way of correcting you without raising his voice. Walter's mouth moved slightly. He learned that late. Holloway almost smiled again. Ryan watched the exchange with growing disbelief. Walter was speaking about Thomas Hale not as a distant legend, but as a man whose habits he remembered personally. Holloway stepped closer to the inspection table. Hale told me something else. He said if Black Tide ever came back, I should not make him explain himself at the gate. Ryan felt the words land. Sir, I followed security procedure. You did. Holloway's answer was immediate. Ryan had expected a reprimand. None came. Procedure brought us this far. Judgment takes us the rest. Walter looked at Ryan, and there was no accusation in his eyes. Somehow that made the lesson heavier. Holloway turned toward the canvas bag. May I? Walter hesitated, then opened the flap himself. The old radio handset appeared beneath the stopped watch and the sealed letter. Holloway stared at it. The color drained slightly from his face. I have seen this before. Walter looked up sharply. No, you have not. Not this one. Holloway reached into his uniform pocket and removed his phone. He opened an old photograph and held the screen toward Walter. The image showed Thomas Hale many years younger, standing beside several men near a dark shoreline. One figure had his back partly turned, but a radio handset hung from his hand. Walter stared at the photograph. The noise of the bass seemed to disappear around him. Holloway lowered his voice. Hale kept this in his office for 32 years. Walter's eyes remained fixed on the image. He was supposed to destroy that. He could not. Holloway paused. Because according to him, that was the night Black Tide stopped being a call sign and became a promise. The word promise carried Walter Mercer farther than Commander Holloway could have known. The bright concrete beneath Gate 2 disappeared from Walter's mind, replaced by a shoreline hidden beneath a moonless sky more than 50 years earlier. Salt wind pressed against his face. Rain moved sideways across dark water. A younger Walter crouched beside a field radio, one hand wrapped around the same handset now resting inside his canvas bag. The equipment was simple, temperamental, and heavy, but that night it was the only thread connecting several scattered teams to a way home. Lieutenant Thomas Hale was young then, younger than Ryan Cole was now, and trying hard to sound older over the radio. We lost the primary route. Hale's voice came through a curtain of static. Walter checked his watch. The extraction window was shrinking. Somewhere offshore, transportation waited on a schedule that did not care about confusion, weather, or frightened men. Then forget the primary route, Walter answered. Give me your position. Hale did. Walter studied the map beneath a dim, shielded light, then listened to the wind and the water beyond the rocks. Other voices began arriving over the radio. One team had lost contact with another. Another could not identify the shoreline marker they had been given. Instructions that had looked perfect inside a planning room were becoming useless outside it. Walter never raised his voice. One at a time, he said. Nobody talks over anybody. The channel settled. Walter began rebuilding the situation from fragments. A landmark. A compass heading. The sound of surf through an open microphone. A description of lights several miles away. He did not have the modern screens Walter had seen at the base that morning. He had a paper map, a watch, a radio, and men trusting the voice coming through it. Hale, move east until the water is on your right. Static. Then Hale answered. Copy. What about the others? Walter looked at the names marked beside his map. I am working them. Minutes passed. Then more. The weather worsened, but Walter remained beside the radio. Each time a voice checked in, he answered the same way. Calm. Clear. Certain. Eventually Hale reached the designated point. I am here, he said. Relief was audible even through the static. Good, Walter replied. Stay there. Hale hesitated. You coming? Walter looked at the remaining marks on his map. Not yet. The window is closing. Then tell them to hold it. For how long? Walter pressed the handset closer. Until everybody is accounted for. Silence filled the channel. Then Hale said, Understood. One by one, the remaining voices returned. Walter guided them toward the same point, never allowing urgency to become panic. At some point, someone on another frequency asked who was controlling the channel. Hale answered before Walter could. Black Tide. Walter frowned. That had not been his designation. It was simply a phrase the men had started using after watching him work through the darkness, steady and unavoidable as the tide itself. The name stayed. Near dawn, Hale's voice returned. Last man is here. Walter checked the list twice. Only then did he stand. Now we go. The memory released him as suddenly as it had taken him. Gate 2 returned. The sunlight felt too bright. Walter's hand was resting on the old radio handset. Nobody around him spoke. Holloway seemed to understand that the silence belonged to another time. Walter slowly removed his hand. Thomas remembered that night differently than I did, he said. Holloway studied him. How did you remember it? Walter looked toward the waterfront. As a night when everyone came home. Ryan Cole stood several feet away, his earlier skepticism gone. That was what the call sign meant. Walter shook his head. Not at first. Holloway's expression grew solemn. But afterward, Walter looked at the sealed letter bearing Thomas Hale's name. Afterward, whenever somebody said black tide over a radio, it meant one thing. Nathan Briggs already knew the answer, but Ryan did not. What? Ryan asked. Walter closed the canvas bag. Nobody leaves until everyone comes back.